I'm Rich Mahler, Accenture Global Security Lead for Utilities. I'm thrilled today to be joined by Piyush Kumar and Paul Grigot from Southern California Edison. Piyush and Paul, would you like to introduce yourselves?
Great, thanks, Rich. Hi, my name is Paul Grigot. I'm the Vice President of our Asset Management Strategy and Engineering function at Southern California Edison. In that function, I oversee a team of data scientists, strategists, and engineers collectively accountable to ensure that we develop a comprehensive investment and maintenance plan, both in the short and long term, to deliver on our company's objectives of providing safe, secure, clean, efficient, and reliable service to our customers. Piyush?
Hello, everyone. I'm Piyush Kumar. I'm the Principal Manager for Cybersecurity Engineering and Risk Management at Southern California Edison. And so within that portfolio, I look at cyber risk across the company, whether it is new projects and new initiatives that we're doing on the IT side of the house or in the operational technology or T&D side of the house, and work with our business partners to help mitigate that cyber risk through tools, technologies, or even designing more secure architectures. So I'm glad to be here today, Rich.
Thank you. To start, why don't we talk a little bit of context? There's a lot changing with the modernization of the grid, and why don't we go with kind of what's happening at Southern California Edison with technology and grid upgrades, and how that's going to lead us to requirements for changing in security as well.
Yeah, great. Thanks, Rich. Maybe I'll take that one to start with. Maybe I'll provide a little bit of context for our audience here. California, I think, as many recognize, for many, many decades, in fact, has been a pretty progressive state when we talk about clean power or clean energy or cleaning the environment. And as such, in fact, for the past 40 years or so, just as a reference point, we haven't seen any increased electric usage per customer over the 40 years. And really, it was driven by some very aggressive energy efficiency programs that were instituted in the state of California. We did this by being creative, by deploying technologies increasingly over the years. That pace of change has only increased over the past decade, and as such, we've seen an increasing adoption of connected loads onto our grid or generation onto our grid that is non-traditional, such as solar panels, batteries, electric vehicle charging. And that has changed the dynamic of our 135-year-old grid, which was designed to be a one-way grid from generation central plant to customer. We've increasingly seen two-way power flows that our grid was never designed to provide, which introduces some reliability and safety challenges. As such, we've had to install or develop or deploy sensing technology, monitoring technology, controlling technologies, increasingly dependent on advanced communication deployments. All that has led us to organically begin to acknowledge and recognize that we are increasingly exposed to a new series of challenges that we had never anticipated and thought through before as a traditional utility. And so we recently, to better prepare ourselves and to actually be better positioned to meet California's latest challenge that they've presented for industry of delivering a clean, carbon-free economy by 2045, we've recently deployed or released a white paper, which we've titled Reimagining the Grid. And in that paper, we describe how we need to further accelerate the development of our grid along the lines of what I was describing earlier, but just faster and better. And one of the key foundational elements of that is, in fact, not just developing a physical layer, but also an IT/OT layer, which is highly dependent on a cybersecure infrastructure. So maybe I'll let Piyush describe a little bit more sort of the technologies we're thinking about there from a cybersecurity perspective. Piyush?
Sure. Thanks, Paul. And so just building upon what Paul was talking about, as we reimagine the grid, as we were calling it in Southern California Edison, we're looking at technology advancements and how this future grid is going to be evolving with that IT layer, which is great because it helps from it gives us operational benefits to control, to sense, as Paul was mentioning. But But certainly, as we start to see this this grid being more connected, you're shifting from more dedicated hardware-based architectures to more of the digital platforms that have embedded processing, software, communications capabilities, and of course, IP-connected T&D assets. And so, as Paul alluded to, this increases our cybersecurity attack surface. And so it really did magnify for us at Edison the need to develop cybersecurity capabilities, establish governance models to really look at this grid modernization and really align it across the company. And so now, with that said, while the attack surface is certainly something we are concerned about, on the flip side, we're also really thinking about this, how this technology, how this connectivity can help with grid security. Can this enable remote vulnerability scanning? Can this enable configuration and security patch management, incident response, asset management? So we are really thinking of it holistically, and cybersecurity wants to be an enabler of this new technology as we continue to advance the grid. And so as SCE, we meet this new reality at what we're calling IT-OT convergence. We want to ensure that IT and cybersecurity are considered core members as we deliver projects, tools, capabilities, and different systems as part of a unified delivery team. So as our partners in T&D, led by Paul, as they're thinking of these new challenges, we want to be part of that process from the onset. And so we've really developed a governance model to enable that.
That's great, and I think you're heading right there. I mean, the technology challenge is pretty significant, right? But it starts with the people, and you've got a pretty diverse set of stakeholders involved in different aspects of the grid, operations, the planning, financial aspects, the regulatory view. How did you pull those stakeholders together and kind of come to a common consensus on your mission here?
Yeah, maybe I'll start this one, Rich. In T&D, by the way, T&D, for those that are not familiar, stands for transmission distribution, if we hadn't made that clear earlier, and is the unit that really sort of manages the grid, right? So T&D is made up of planners, linemen, troublesmen, technicians, engineers, electrical engineers primarily, and so we're focused on making sure that we're delivering a reliable service and we're getting all the functionality so that we can operate it as effectively as possible, so that we can deliver the function that it was designed to deliver. We never thought about cybersecurity. We never thought about communications networks. In fact, in our company for a number of years, we would see the cybersecurity team as a bit eccentric and a bit of a skunk's work kind of effort, and so really unique and different. But with the deployment of these technologies, this edge computing technologies, and the need to sort of increasingly think about advanced analytics and artificial intelligence, we've had to sort of develop new capabilities within T&D and a new appreciation of sort of the other side, the IT side, right, of OT. And I think there's been an education within our company, starting with our leadership team at the executive level, and a full appreciation of the implications of these deployments and the exposure that it could present, especially with events like what happened in Ukraine a few years ago. That those served the purpose of energizing and building a sense of urgency. And really, the having the audience within T&D, the same audience I just described, not just sort of complying, but actually pulling information, pulling a need. There was a desire to be educated, to understand exactly the implications of these deployments and this technology, and what could we do in T&D to help move this along. So progressively, really over the past 5 to 8 years. There's been an increasing acceleration of ownership by the users, by the T&D community, to better understand that world. Cybersecurity is no longer eccentric. It's no longer skunk works. It's actually core, now part of what we do. And we've brought the teams together through a very intentional program, but it was partially motivated and driven organically, if you will, by a recognition that we really needed to control this and come together as a team. Piyush, you may want to share some of your perspectives on the cybersecurity side.
Yeah, no, absolutely. And, traditionally, and this is across many organizations, sometimes cyber is seen as a separate group, and in some ways can also be seen as a hindrance to progress and to connectivity. And so one of the key things that we felt was really important to do was to not just be that hindrance, to be the partner, to actually embed ourselves into processes that already existed in the grid environment and how they deploy projects. So what did we do? We actually took a step back, and one of the first things we did was we thought it was really important to go through a discovery campaign, and we actually used Revolution Security, which is now part of Accenture Security, to help us with that effort and start us on this journey. We were already doing a lot of cybersecurity work, but this really helped formalize it and started to think through, what does this governance look like? And so we started that discovery campaign to really assess and conduct workshops, really look at what is the current state of OT cybersecurity or operational technology cybersecurity? What are the operating models that are used to deliver and go from ideation on projects all the way out to production? And so, and what are the controls that are in place today? So there was patch management going on, there were cybersecurity things going on, but how do we actually formalize some of that effort? And so after we did the discovery campaign, we then moved into a design phase where we could actually say, how are we going to look at cybersecurity, embed it, where do we start, and how do we make it a scalable effort? A prioritized, risk-informed, prioritized effort was really important. We recognize you can't tackle everything, but we do need it to be led by risk. And so that was one of the key things. So just at a high level, 3 big things that we really started our effort on, our journey on with were, number one, looking at cyber risk assessments for vendors and equipment and services that we were putting into that grid environment. So how do we ensure that we're part of that risk assessment before it's actually put into the system? The second thing was we felt it was important to develop standards. Standards that could be used by the operators when designing, for example, the next substation that had IP connectivity. How do we ensure that as it's being designed, there's a standard that can be followed so that it is designed securely? And then the other big one that we worked on was really looking at our assets and conducting what we call the digital asset inventory. So it wasn't just in terms of what assets are out there in terms of the hardware, but also what are the digital attributes on those specific assets that were just so critical. Again, we wanted to be risk informed. And again, there's so many assets on the grid environment that we did think it was really important to start from a risk informed digital asset inventory that we could take a look at and connect back to cybersecurity's monitoring and logging tools and capabilities. And then after that, once we went through that process of the discovery and design phase, as Paul alluded to, we felt it was really, really important to get that executive buy-in because that will then funnel down to the entire organization. And so we were able to brief that at the executive level. And really what the output of all those briefings and all those findings was a recognition by executive leadership at Edison, including Paul, that let's formalize this program. And so we developed a charter, we developed an operating model for what we now call our OT cybersecurity program. And we actually established a project management office, a PMO function, to ensure that we were moving forward in an intentional way. And we were actually being coordinated across the company. And I'll touch on a little bit later what that governance model actually looks like. But at a high level, that's where we were, and that's kind of where we started.
Yeah, that's great. Thank you. So you got all these people together, you kind of get everybody on the same page for an objective or goals. What were the specific objectives you set for the team to go forward, right? What were we driving to go? How are we going to know that we're making the progress and getting the success that we've assembled to go off and take charge on?
Paul, I'll maybe start and feel free to jump in here. At a high level, there were a couple of motivating factors. Let me start there. Number one, there was a recognition that cyber threats to the energy sector, electricity sector, were ever increasing. And we were seeing that, as Paul referenced, Ukraine 2015 and 16, Triton Trisis. So there were cyber threats that were increasing. At the same time, we were becoming more connected as a grid, again, for operational benefits. But that certainly we were seeing that happen. We were becoming more connected, whether it's for distributed generation or just for our own operational efficiency to, for example, connect to and control substations remotely. It was something that we were seeing happening. And so we took a step back and said, okay, what are our objectives for this program? And so number one, it was prepare for the future, this new reality of an IP connected assets. We really needed to be prepared to address that. Number two, another objective was really unify the OT or operation technology enterprise. And so how do we unify how projects are delivered? And really, it should be a collaborative process. It shouldn't be, one organization wants to go at it one way and one organization at a different way. Really, this was a unified effort where we had individuals from Paul's team, from the transmission and distribution shop, the traditional IT organization, and then also the cybersecurity organization to really come together to be very intentional about unifying across the enterprise. And then number three, we felt it was really important, as I referenced earlier, to establish a culture of risk-based decision-making. We really wanted to implement this. It will help us drive coordinated planning, prioritization, and then it should be risk-informed. And so those at a high level, Rich, were the big three: prepare for the future, unify the OT enterprise, and then establish a culture of risk-based decision-making.
Nice, Paul.
Yeah, maybe I'll just briefly add to a couple of things that Piyush said to sort of provide maybe a T&D dimension, if you will, to it. You know, one of the challenges we have in an asset management, in establishing an asset management operating model, if you will, is to acknowledge and recognize that we have a multitude of objectives that we're trying to meet, and we have constrained resources, both financial and people and otherwise. And so we have to be very thoughtful about how to best stage all of these investments and all of these changes. And cyber is one of many dimensions that T&D is attempting to address. So the key for us in what Piyush described was to integrate cyber in the right places across all those objectives that we were attempting to develop plans for. So developing a bit of a universal roadmap is what we've been calling it within our company, that sort of, is embedded in how we achieve reliability and how we achieve clean energy and how we achieve worker safety and public safety and wildfire resilience and all those key objectives that we have set forth. So that was one dimension I wanted to emphasize. Another one that I'll just briefly emphasize as well relates to the last point Piyush made about developing sort of a risk-based decision-making process. For those that are outside of the utility industry in the audience, just wanted to emphasize that we are heavily regulated in our industry for good reason. There's a lot of implications from a safety perspective and a reliability perspective to the economy and to society. I would go as far as saying, and so we have to be very thoughtful and careful about how we go about doing this. The compliance framework that we operate within is oftentimes really a minimum standard, and historically utilities were guided by that minimum standard. And what we've evolved to over the past several years as a company, and cyber is just one of a few examples, is to go above and beyond and to really think more progressively about how do we really want to manage risk here. And so that's really what Piyush was describing here. And we're taking that same model and applying it to many other key objectives that we have. So it's really becoming fully integrated, and we're increasingly making decisions based on data and advanced modeling capabilities. Rich?
That's great. Thanks, Paul. So you've got the program in place, you've got the stakeholders in place now, but you're not operating in a static environment, right? Things are changing every day. ongoing investments, ongoing changes. How have you established sort of a governance program to sit over the top of that to keep it a living operating process and team as they continue to do the rest of the work that's going on at the same time?
Sure, Rich. I'll start that. So my team manages that OT cybersecurity project management office, or the PMO function at Edison. And so what we did was we actually, it's really a tiered approach. So at the very high level, we have a governance board that is made up of executives like Paul from the T&D side, but also we have leadership from the IT side of the house as well. And so we have a leadership governance board across T&D and IT at that executive level that provides that strategic vision and oversight. Underneath it, we have what we call our domain team. That is a group of principal managers that are represented by different parts of T&D and IT, those core functions that we felt were really important. And so we brought them all together to actually be the more hands-on and working with the subject matter experts to execute on the work streams and projects that we had identified as the priorities for each year. Beneath the domain team, which are essentially senior managers, you had project teams. So for each of the work streams that we had a lead for the project team. One of the key things that we did was we had a representative, even if it was, for example, a vulnerability management program in the grid environment. We ensured that we had representatives from the IT for Grid Services group, the T&D group from cybersecurity. You had representation by every one of them to help influence what that program would look like. And also a lot of this is still informed by best practices in industry, like the NIST cybersecurity framework, or tools like Department of Energy's C2M2. We really did want to focus this on those best practices and tools. And as we just mentioned, it should be risk informed in terms of how we determine those work streams. And then finally, the last group is the project management office. And I think that's just been key to ensure consistency, coordination. How does one work stream fit into another one? How can they help each other? For example, our digital asset inventory work stream has been immensely helpful in how we shape our vulnerability management program. And so we want to make sure that those ties exist as we move forward in the development of different initiatives and projects for the OTC program.
Paul, anything else?
No, I think Piyush covered it well. Thanks.
Excellent. So I think you've shared a lot of lessons today that don't just apply to your peers and utilities, but really broadly anybody embarking on a similar project across industries where you've got the operational side, which is the revenue of the company, the health and safety aspects, right? All those things that we need to address. To kind of wrap this up with the lessons that you've experienced, advice for people that are on your same path or just about to start, what actions would you recommend that they take to benefit from the experiences that you've had?
Yeah, maybe I can provide just a couple of thoughts here. I think what really got things started for us is, frankly, as you would expect, making sure that senior leadership was aligned on both sides of the camp, so to speak, right? So the IT and the OT side, and that took a little while. I think there was an understanding intellectually as to what was going on, but maybe a differences of perspectives of the sense of urgency. And the need to really sort of dig deep into this thing, and frankly, there was some maybe some organizational concerns that were sort of getting in the way at first. What does this mean about is IT going to be running OT, right? There was that kind of mindset that was floating out there. And so, getting senior leadership aligned and bought in, and with a common vision and a common understanding of what we're trying to achieve, taking the emotional edge out of it, so that we can collectively, get our teams really sort of aligned, if you will. Maybe I'll start. I think that would be sort of a key dimension to get started. Piyush, do you want to maybe add something else on your end?
Sure. I'll just add one thing. I think one of the things that on the cyber side of the house, what we learned was, it was really important for us to help explain and train and educate folks on that T&D side of the house as to what are the real implications of a cyber incident. When they generally hear about cyber incidents, it's there's a phishing attack and someone's data was leaked. And what we were able to help explain was like that Ukraine 2015-16, where a cyber incident could lead to operational impacts, could lead to safety impacts. And so that's kind of what really helped, I think, really explain it and help drive this forward.
Excellent. Well, Paul and Piyush, thank you so much for sharing your time with us. Really appreciate your insights. I'm sure there's a couple things people were taking notes as they go through. Thank you to everybody for joining us, and I hope you enjoy the rest of the conference. Have a great day.